It was lower pitched than I remember,
What keeps
and parts of
happening?
the didn't want to.
Okay, it's back. Yeah, I didn't even do anything. I heard a sound and it was that disconnecting. Has anyone pledged to Wilgie? This is not a live project. This is a draft. I think it can only record 3 hours at a time. The average person carries 2.9 devices. And the e-reader is he making an e-reader game? Okay, start.
Stir any unnecessary drama.
Drama.
He was sure there had been a strong wind last night, and the wind was carrying the noise farther than its natural reach. He told us to listen. We did. He was right. We couldn't hear it now. We forgot about it and went about our daily goings. The next night, it happened again. I stayed up in bed with my back to the wall. The screaming was even louder than before, but this time something was different. It was lower pitched than I remember, and parts of the loop were slowed down, as if the recording were warped in places. At times, the loop did not loop naturally and instead picked up at a random place in the middle. My mom didn't mention anything at the breakfast table, but both her and my dad seemed tense.
The tiger fucked it up.
The third night, I mustered the courage to stand beside my bedroom window and look out into the yard. For a moment, I stood, rooted to the spot, my hands shaking no matter how hard I clenched them. The noise sidled in through the cracks in the window.
Damn it! How'd you see him?
I watched the outline of the trees in the yard.
Good!
Perfectly still. Not even the slightest breeze stirred their branches. My mom announced that she would be going to visit her sisters in town the next day and would probably spend the night there. She invited me to come along, but I chose to stay at the farm. I took Mom's place beside Dad in their bed that night, but even that didn't help. I don't think my dad was asleep either, for he was unnaturally still the whole night. We began to hear the noise during the day, too. I was drawing with chalk on the sidewalk when it happened. My shoulders tensed, and the hairs on the back of my neck prickled. There was only one scream.
I got
Short,
some oatmeal.
High-pitched one. And then the recording fell silent. It happened again several times throughout the day, but never the whole loop. Just clips from it.
Never arose.
Later that evening, Peyton's dad came up the driveway on his four-wheeler. He said he was looking for their dog, a sweet yellow lab that had been missing since that morning. Dad said he was sorry and that we hadn't seen her.
Sorry, love.
I stared at him, silently begging him to mention the recording, but he didn't. He was a quiet man, after all. He didn't want to bring up any unnecessary drama. Mom stayed away the whole week. Dad and I didn't sleep. By Saturday, the screaming could be heard constantly.
They stayed up playing Halo.
Deviated from the familiar loop entirely.
Oh yeah, they can't.
I didn't recognize any of it. Somehow, sometimes the screams were thin and long. Other times, they were hardly more than growls.
Thin scream.
Once, while my dad had been heating up meatloaf for lunch, the noise rose into such a rancorous din that he dropped the plate and it shattered. I pressed my hands over my ears where I sat at the table and squeezed my eyes shut, but it didn't help. The noise forced its way in through cracks of my fingers and pinched my throat and rattled my ribcage. The din lasted for a whole minute and then fell silent. Dad was shaking. That was the last we heard of the noise that day.
Dad was
shaving. Peyton came by Saturday evening to ask permission to cross our road to collect the equipment. He was so excited. I watched him disappear into the creek bottoms with a sense of tired relief. After the equipment was gone, it would all stop. I couldn't wait to get a full night's sleep. Not a minute later, I spotted Peyton coming back up from the creek. I was confused. It had taken us much longer to set up the camera and speakers, so I'd only assumed it would take just as long to collect them. My breath stilled when Peyton came closer. He didn't look right. His eyes were wide and his face pale. Something wet dribbled from his chin and onto his shirt. I later
Saliva.
realized it was vomit. My dad caught him before he fell and demanded to know what had happened. Peyton couldn't speak. He just cried. We called his dad. I looked after Peyton as both my dad and his dad went into the
Good.
bottoms. They were gone a long time. When they returned, their faces were grim, and they
Fuck.
smelled funny. I noticed red on my dad's hands. I asked what was wrong, but they brushed right past me and immediately called the police.
Was that social
Nobody would
media?
tell me what had happened. I sat on the couch as a blur of neighbors and police officers swirled around me. At
dang
one
old
point,
boy.
an officer placed something on the kitchen table and left. I looked into the kitchen
his
curiously. It was the camera from the bottoms. I wish I hadn't looked. The camera was a little banged up. Tiny scratches and dents covered the plastic casing. When I lifted it, my hand stuck to the plastic. Something tacky and odorous covered the screen, but it turned on fine. The first set of photos were normal, just the pussy willows cast green in the glow of the night setting.
Two-dad
As
power
I
team.
continued to click through them, they quickly became strange. At one point, the camera angle changed, as if the camera had been knocked from its post. Grass now obscured most of the frame. Flecks of red appeared on the lens and remained for the rest of the sets. One photo made me pause. There was a figure in this one, or half a figure, as most of the upper torso hadn't made it into the frame. I thought it could be human, but it didn't look like it should be standing upright. Its legs were twisted like an animal, and it seemed to have difficulty supporting itself in an upright position. Besides the legs, a long, thin arm hung. Whatever it was must have been stooped over, for
Someone
its
or
fingertips
something.
hung below its crooked knees. The next set was different.
You best start
It
believing in
was
ghost
as if
stories,
the camera
boyo.
had been picked up and was now being held.
Just left a.
The first
You're
photo
in
was
one.
of the bottoms at night.
You best
The
start
next
believing in
startled
ghost
me.
stories.
I had to look closely before deciding what it was. A rabbit had been laid in the bushes, but its ears and most of its scalp had been peeled away. The next was of the same rabbit, but a thin, dark hand was holding it up against the sky. Its limp body hung like something from
I
a
don't know.
nightmare. In the following photos, more rabbits joined the one,
Which
each
one?
with their
F3?
ears and scalp removed. Then a cat. Then more cats. Then a dog, the yellow lab. Then the lion.
Asian
The
steps.
following photo was of 7 rabbits, 3 cats, 1 dog, and the lion all laid out in a row facing the same way. Their arms and legs had been arranged as if they were marching, like some parade. All of their scalps
lunch
had been
parade.
removed, and tiny white glints of their skulls could be seen. The last photo was overly bright, like the photo had been taken too close with the flash on. An eye dominated the frame, but it was yellowed and crusty, and had a bar pupil like a horse. In the bottom corner, the edge of a mouth could be seen. No lips, just teeth, sharp and little, with wide gaps of red gum between them. Wish I hadn't looked. I heard my dad talking to the police outside. They said the speakers had malfunctioned. The recording
Yeah, okay.
had only played the first
Yeah.
night.
Oh, ooh. Those were true
Hi,
hell.
Otis Gyrie here. Thanks for joining me around the digital campfire today.
So there was a monster out there killing animals, and it decided to make loud kills because it knew it was being watched. Mr. Sweetly. Ooh. Rabbits in the... Oh, yeah, that's the one we just did. Okay, so when's David Cummings gonna do some good ass shit? He does little voices and accents. Oh shit, a hotel story.
Good evening, listener. Thanks for joining us. But a word of warning. If you're looking for fairy tales
No
and
pussies or
bedtime
skunks
stories,
are allowed
you've
to
come to
listen
the
to these.
wrong place.
Yeah.
But if you enjoy it, when your blood runs cold, if the feeling of being followed and watched makes you feel
Okay, so-
alive, well then, come on in, turn on all your lights, get cozy, and settle in as master storyteller Otis Gyrie
Well, I have to
weaves
go on this thing,
tales
don't
of
I?
terror for your entertainment.
bastard.
But there's still time if you'd like to turn back. Ah, still here. Good, good. Who needs sleep anyway? You're listening to Horror Story Time. Please welcome your host and the star of this series, master storyteller Otis Gyrie.
Been romancing Henry with your piano playing, have you? Don't strike a false note.
The Woman in the Niqab by Lindsay Goddard. If you're reading this email, you've been selected
Is this still
as the
up?
new night auditor at the Ladford Inn.
Is this a 5
Congratulations. Well, I suppose. My memories of the hotel are mostly fond ones, with the exception of my final week when I decided
Oh, yeah,
I'd
it's
rather
not for her.
take my chances in the unemployment line. Here's to hoping you're spared the misery of the chilling encounters which sent me running from the Ladford, with my pride dragging behind me like a dead dog. I didn't put in the proper 2 weeks' notice when I resigned from my position, a grievance which Eleanor was quick to air, as tends to be the case with most of Eleanor's grievances. On her bad days, she comes off as a real ice queen.
Lindsay
Her
Goddard, yeah.
steely blue
Thanks.
eyes could shatter diamonds if she concentrated hard enough, I'm certain. But don't be fooled. Deep down, she's a real softy. She insisted I write this letter since I left you with little or no training. How can I refuse? She owns 4 hotels and personally manages each one, and I understand her concerns with making sure you receive proper training because, quite simply, she's too busy to deal with it. She never sits still. She's all business, and I'd hate to play cards with a woman because she's got a poker face to rival all others. I've seen her use it in response to difficult
shit, that was all
customers
your
in a
money.
hotel drama, all of which you'll come to know too well. She uses it in other circumstances, too, like when I think she's caught a glimpse of the Ladford's unwelcome guest, the tortured woman who now haunts my dreams. I once asked Eleanor if she's seen anything strange. She donned that poker face and shook her head, and I couldn't tell if her response was genuine or a bluff.
I wish
The
it-
slightest wrinkle of fear crossed her brow, though, and it whispered, "Yes, I've seen her. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's back up. Eleanor
You
has
better
been my
back it up.
supervisor for more than 5 years. Despite her tough exterior, she's always shown me kindness, which is why I agreed to write this letter. She asked me to give you some pointers and share with you, my predecessor, all the expert advice I've gathered in half a decade on the job. This isn't going to be that sort of letter. If Eleanor had chosen you for the position, I'm sure you're plenty bright and capable of handling things on your own. Besides, there's something more important I need to tell you.
God damn,
Forget
go
about room
fast.
keys and guest
Oh, man.
service for a moment. I need to warn you about the woman in the niqab. 3 weeks ago, a
hoping I
Pakistani
could
man by the
focus
name
guys
of
real
Samir
fast.
Ahmad came to stay at the hotel after arriving in the States. The construction of his new home was running behind. It would be several days before it was finished and ready to pass inspection. He was stuck in limbo between his old home in Pakistan and his newly built American mansion.
What's that?
He'd paid good money, more money than I could dream of spending on a house, and he was furious at the situation. The spoiled son of an oil company CEO, He didn't care for the public aspect of a hotel, sickened by the inconvenience of being forced to
Total
lay his
census
head
of
where
15
so
and
many
a half
others
years?
had laid theirs.
Is that real?
He let his
that's
frustration
so
show,
good.
always tense,
What a fucking creep.
biding his time with every painstaking tick of the clock. His dark eyes twitched when he spoke, his bronzed complexion flush with impatience. He had an assistant by the name of Tahir, a short Pakistani man, very soft-spoken and polite, though his English was broken. Tahir was not staying at our five-star hotel, but rather
David
a
Cummings
ramshackle
made
motel
the
several
accent.
blocks east, as his employer saw fit. He had dark circles under the dark circles in his eyes, and I was certain it was from dealing with the stressful antics of Mr. Ahmed. The wife, Mrs. Ahmed, remained a mystery to me throughout her 2-week stay. I never learned her first name, never dared to ask. She did not converse with men outside her immediate family, only occasionally whispering in her husband's ear. She most likely didn't know a word of English. With no reason to establish a first-name basis between the two of us, I accepted her as a blank slate, an unknown guest.
This isn't
But after
blank.
so many years of getting to know my guests on a personal level in
Did I
order
steal
to
it?
better accommodate their needs, I admit it felt odd to have this one slip through my fingers. You know how skimpy clothing is often referred to as leaving nothing to the imagination?
I'm dying right now. No
Well,
comment
Mrs.
while I write
Ahmed's
this note.
wardrobe left everything to the imagination. I was familiar with such cultural garments from
Yeah, that's the worst
textbooks,
part. She gives me nothing to
television,
work
and
with.
newspapers, but I'd never seen one
Emphasize.
close up. A niqab, that's what they're called.
That's
A black
the
veil
name of it.
concealed the entirety of her face. It covered her eyebrows and even the bridge of her nose. The eye slits were narrow, and I remember thinking it would drive me nuts to have all that
Jojo?
cloth in my peripheral vision.
Pretty good.
A headdress
Will
draped
Smith's
her
son is
shoulders
really
and hung down her
terrible.
back, and not a single
No,
strand
Brother
of hair
Mandel.
could be seen.
Ter-
I hid my discomfort as best I could, mindful not to hurt the feelings of the woman beneath the shroud. Different strokes for different strokes, I always say.
Different strokes for
I
different
noticed
strokes.
that even her fingers were hidden beneath
Oh, yeah.
gloves. Her hands left no prints where she leaned up on the counter, and I thought she might as well be a ghost. It was a perfectly innocent thought, which seems so ominous in retrospect. I made sure to smile at the woman every evening as she
Jared
came to get
Fogle
a
is
bucket
the
of
subway
ice.
guy, the subway pedophile.
I wished to make her feel as comfortable as possible. The move from overseas was a huge one. I imagine adjusting to the changing culture was exhausting. I have no way of knowing if she smiled back, but a couple of times she nodded in my direction before hurrying over to the ice machine. I assume Mr. Ahmed had some personal use for the ice, as he would yell for her to hurry up if she took a few seconds too long.
Yeah, what the fuck are you doing?
Perhaps
that
he
ice?
needed to
Hurry
soak his
up.
feet in a cold bath after a full day of pacing back and forth and placing angry phone calls to the real estate agent. One thing is for sure, his wife was never fast enough.
She was never
In a gruff
ghost.
foreign tongue, he barked at her from down the hall, and although I
What if
did
she
not
is an
understand
ice
his
person
words,
underneath that?
they couldn't strike me
Yeah,
as
exactly.
particularly encouraging. 2 nights before Samir Ahmed checked out of the hotel and
back
headed
the
for his
title.
newly built mansion, the woman in the niqab encountered a problem on her nightly run to the lobby. "Out of order" was scrawled on a sheet of paper and taped to the machine, written with red permanent marker in all capital letters. The daytime clerk had scheduled a repair for the following day and scribbled a post-it note to me, which now clung to the front desk, drawing my attention with a nauseating shade of yellow. Mrs. Ahmed couldn't read the out-of-order sign, of course, but at a glance at the empty tray and a few unresponsive clicks of the button told her everything she needed to know. She hung her head in defeat, hugging the empty bucket to her black-clad bosom. I was quick to respond.
Please.
"Mrs. Ahmed," I said, addressing her directly for the first time since she had arrived, "I can help with that." I pointed to the bucket in her gloved hands. I approached, and as I did, her eyes widened like a cornered mouse. Then something very unexpected happened. I saw beauty in those eyes. It struck me. It held me captive. Her eyes were not brown as I had imagined the countless times she averted her gaze, but a brilliant shade of amber which shined like bowls of honey in the sunlight.
Let me go.
I reached for the bucket in a
She was
cautious,
secretly
"I come in
saw
peace" gesture.
Not sure those
I was taken aback by her gorgeous orbs, and she by my
Yeah,
close
girl.
proximity. She loosened her grip and let me remove the bucket from her fingers. I ran to
Damn,
the
girl, you
employee
fit.
lounge, moving quickly as I knew her ticking time bomb husband would run out of patience soon. I filled it and returned to the lobby even faster than I departed. She was standing in the exact same spot, a motionless Nakabi mannequin, until she nodded her thanks to me. I held the bucket a moment longer and gazed into those lovely eyes.
No.
I held the bucket a moment
what just
longer and
happened?
gazed into those lovely eyes. Amber
Okay,
is
well,
a
suddenly
rare color, the color of
so
my
many of
first
her men
girlfriend's
appeared.
eyes, the thought of whom still causes my
Okay,
heart to
loser.
race.
What the
I was
fuck
irresistibly
that?
drawn to that color. We plan to have the ice machine fixed by tomorrow evening, I said. I was stalling, though I wasn't
Activity
sure why.
reset. Carriage is out of.
There's another one on
Yeah,
the
what
second floor if you need it. Recalling our language barrier, I frowned. Pieces of ice fell to the carpet as I handed the
A weird
silent
thing
woman
just
her
happened.
bucket, now brimming with frozen
You
cubes.
should have just killed her, dude.
Then I noticed
Already
Mr. Ahmed 6 doors down, his head poking into the hall. His olive complexion was flushed with blood as he observed our one-sided conversation with an unpleasant scowl. I immediately turned and made a beeline for the desk, hoping I hadn't caused the woman any troubles. 30 minutes later, I received a noise complaint from room 110. A middle-aged businesswoman by
Okay,
the
so
name
none
of
of her
Susan
guys were
Bennett
around, and I
had
was
been
getting
staying
in
in
a cart,
110.
and then like five.
She was a
of them.
quiet, introverted woman. She tipped the staff well and kept her room tidy without much help from housekeeping. She didn't strike me as a prankster, so I believed her when she told me she'd heard horrible screams coming from the next room. I was suddenly tense. An icy knot formed in my stomach. My mouth went dry, and all I could do was force a small amount of saliva down my
Horse of a
throat and
different
try to
color.
locate my voice. Needless to say, I had a